I've come to believe that sometimes the bravest choice isn't to stay, but to leave. Not dramatically, not with slammed doors or endless explanations, but clearly and decisively. Cutting ties with everyone was, for me, a decision born out of an instinct for inner survival. Not because people were bad, but because I had lost myself trying to be everything they needed. For a long time, I confused closeness with obligation. I believed that being connected meant always being available, responding quickly, understanding endlessly, forgiving constantly. Slowly, these expectations turned into chains. Every relationship added an invisible weight to my shoulders, and I kept going, convinced that this was what normal life looked like. I only stopped when exhaustion became my identity. I realized I was living more in reaction than in choice. I reacted to other people's needs, moods, and crises. Rarely did I ask myself what I wanted because the question felt selfish. In reality, the true selfishness was abandoning myself to preserve others' comfort. Cutting ties was the first time I put myself at the center without guilt. When I chose to withdraw, I felt fear of being forgotten, judged, of being left alone with my own thoughts. But beneath that fear was something stronger, relief. For the first time, I didn't have to explain who I was, justify my decisions, or carry conversations that didn't reflect me. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was liberating. Solitude forced me to look at myself honestly. Without distractions, without external narratives, I began to see clearly which parts of me were authentic and which had been built for acceptance. It was painful to admit how much I had shaped myself around other people's expectations, but it was also the first step toward rebuilding. You can't fix something if you won't admit it's broken. I discovered that many relationships were maintained out of inertia. I spoke because that's what you do, went out because that's normal, stayed because that's how it's always been. Completely cutting these ties showed me how few connections were truly alive. The rest were social habits that consumed time, energy, and meaning. One essential thing I learned was the difference between solitude and isolation. Chosen solitude is a space for growth. Forced isolation is a wound. I chose solitude. I chose to be with myself, to listen, to relearn who I was. In that space, I began to develop a healthy relationship with my own mind. Without the constant noise of other voices, my thoughts became clearer. I started to notice what genuinely brought me joy and what I did only out of conformity. I realized that many desires weren't truly mine, but inherited. When I cut ties, I also cut these projections. What remained was the essential I learned to manage my emotions without projecting them onto others. Before, I searched for comfort, confirmation, distraction. Now, I had to sit with discomfort and understand it instead of covering it up. It was a slow process, but a deep one. Cutting ties taught me emotional intelligence more than any conversation ever had. Another major gain was the freedom to fail. When there are no eyes constantly watching you, mistakes become lessons, not labels. I could experiment, change direction, reconsider without the fear of disappointing anyone. That freedom helped me grow authentically, not performatively. I became more attentive to my boundaries. In the past, I ignored or violated them to avoid losing people. Now I understand that anyone who leaves when you respect your boundaries isn't a loss, but a clarification. Cutting ties gave me the chance to reset my standards. Next time, I'll choose connections that don't demand self-erasure. My creativity took shape in silence. Without constant influence, comparison, or the need for validation, I began to create for myself. Ideas became more honest, more daring. I realized many of my blocks came from the fear of being judged. When there was no one left to convince, I became free. I also understood how much I defined myself through roles: the good friend, the reliable one, the helper. When these roles disappeared, I felt an identity void. But the void wasn't a failure, it was space. A place where I could build something real, not just useful. Cutting ties taught me to value time, my time. Without shared schedules and constant compromises, I began to live more present, to do things at my own pace, to understand that life isn't a race to maintain appearances, but a process of becoming. I became more selective, not out of superiority, but out of respect for my energy, my direction, my peace. I learned that not everyone who wants to enter my life deserves to stay. Cutting ties with everyone was my way of resetting the door. Perhaps the most important lesson was learning not to fear myself anymore. Many people avoid solitude because they're afraid of what they'll find there. I found imperfections, yes, but also potential. I found a voice worth listening to, a version of myself that didn't need applause. I'm not saying this is the path for everyone or forever. I'm only saying that, for me, it was necessary. It was a radical pause in a world that demands constant presence. It was an act of honesty in a life full of compromises. In the end, cutting ties with everyone was the best thing I could do because it brought me back to myself, not the accepted version, but the real one. And from this place, I know that any future relationship will be a choice, not a dependency.